Nissan, they say it makes you feel like driving. Honda states that they make it simple. So,
by the late 80s, Chevy had had enough of being upstaged by the imports when it came to compact cars. After all, Chevy is the heartbeat of America. We should be making the cars that working class Americans drive. It's time for change. The Citation is out, the Corsica is in. So step aside, imports, and step aside, Ford. You think your Taurus is so futuristic? Well, Chevy about to make a car that is so modern, so streamlined, and so futuristic the damn aliens will want it. In 1987, GM has some hot new models for all you compact class peasants, buyers. The 4-door Corsica, the 2-door Beretta, plus, if you live in Canada, the Pontiac version, for which they resurrected the Tempest nameplate. So let me take you through all 3 of those models today, from the heartbeat of America, today's Chevrolet.
Heartbeat of America. Chevrolet. That's today's Chevrolet.
Technically, the first model year for the Corsica and company is 1987, but 87 models were sold only as rental vehicles or dealer leases, allowing Chevrolet to ramp up production more slowly than usual, and hopefully weeding out some quality control issues along the way. In response to dealership and journalist feedback, Corsicas would receive several updates prior to their general population release in March of 1987 for the 88 model year. I know the Corsica's styling probably isn't turning too many heads today, but it would have been a fairly modern looking car back in 1987, although I don't actually think it's as futuristic looking as the Taurus. Nevertheless, it's a big step forward from the Citation, and it really looks quite a bit more modern to me than even a Cavalier, a model which it shares a number of components with. Besides, don't you know the Corsica is more aerodynamic than a Porsche 928 or a Ferrari Testarossa? Let's take a look on the inside. Ooh, spacey. Oh, so that's where Honda got the idea for a full dash length climate vent from. I actually kinda like this dash, but I'm not a fan of the climate controls and radio and this pod thing that just hangs off the bottom like an afterthought. It's almost like someone designed a clean, modern looking dash, but forgot the radio and climate controls and then were just like, oh crap, well, we gotta go to production, just put it there. In the theme of the future, as projected from the 1980s, the original radio is a bunch of tiny push buttons, even for the volume. How does this mistake happen so many times? Every time a manufacturer releases a radio without a rotary volume knob, it's poorly received and they have to change it. Yet, every few years, someone makes another radio without a proper volume knob. This particular radio was not well received, and it's one of the things they changed for the 88 model year. Pods flanking the gauges house the controls for your rear defroster, which is optional by the way, headlights in the form of push buttons, and wipers in the form of a knob. So the wipers get a rotary knob but the volume doesn't? Early models have a column-mounted shifter if you get the auto, and it was pointed out by Motor Week and probably many others at the time that it was in the way of the cigarette lighter, and easy to bump into neutral if you flail your arm carelessly without looking. It's the 80s, you can't be having anything in the way of the cigarette lighter. They eventually replaced it with a conventional floor shifter, but I'm not sure exactly when this change became standard. I think it was an option for the first few years. There is mention of the floor console shifter being optional in the 1990 brochure. Initially there were just 2 trims, base and the LT model. Base models had a very sparse gauge cluster with just a speedo and fuel gauge, but LT models make John Davis happy with a full complement of analog gauges. However, cramming 4 more gauges inside a cluster that was already almost full due to these 2 oversized half moons leave it looking very small and cramped. Why does the speedo and tack have to be so big? I think this gauge cluster design definitely could have been better. LT models also upgrade you from this very basic steering wheel to this one. Now this looks like a much more well-to-do steering wheel. It's almost an Oldsmobile now. Base models have gray door handles while LT models are painted black. Other LT equipment includes a sport suspension with a faster steering ratio, higher spring rates, a rear stabilizer bar, 14-inch styled wheels, black body side moldings with a red accent line, and red badging topped off with a red outlined bow tie.
What had really impressed me was the quickness of steering on the Corsica. You turn the wheel almost like an IROC Z.
On either trim, you could upgrade this basic interior to what Chevy called their custom CL cloth interior, which gives you different, more plush fabric over more deeply contoured seats, as well as a center console, door pockets, and door accent molding. It also says CL on the doors, so your date knows this ain't no bare bones model. Honey, them Cavalier boys are a dime a dozen, but my custom CL cloth Corsica has more comfortable furniture in here than their living room does. And also probably my living room. The glove box is a sliding drawer, which is kind of cool, prevents the annoying problem that a lot of glove boxes have where they dump half the contents whenever you open them. All model years came with 2 engine options, a 4-cylinder and a V6. For the early models, the base engine was the LL8, a 2-liter 4-cylinder shared with the Beretta and Tempest, as you'd expect, but also the Cavalier, the Buick Skyhawk, and that crazy Oldsmobile that looks like it has 6 headlights. It's throttle body fuel injected and rated at 90 horsepower and 108 pound-feet of torque.
It's a second-generation design with all new features that make life easier on the pocketbook. And say goodbye to the conventional distributor. The computer-controlled coil ignition system located here eliminates it.
I don't know, bro. That's getting a bit too modern for me. The optional V6 borrows the 2.8-liter LB6 from the Celebrity. It's got multi-point fuel injection, and it's rated at 130 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque. A 5-speed manual is the standard transmission on all Corsicas, with a 3-speed auto available as an option. Brakes are disc on the front, drums on the rear. When the 88 model Corsica went on sale to the general public, it was quite well received, and it did claw some sales back from competitors. In fact, the Corsica was the second best-selling passenger car in America for 1988, bested only by the Ford Escort.
Corsica is going to reestablish Chevrolet as a major force in the compact market. But as for cars like Ford Tempo, Toyota Camry, Plymouth Reliant, well, they've had a free ride long enough.
There are a few more updates for 89. The rotary-style wiper control is replaced with a slider taken from the Beretta. It looks like they updated the headlight buttons a bit as well, and I noticed a slight revision to the gauges. They got rid of the weird outlines around them. Good call, although I think there's still plenty of room for improvement here. They also introduced a 5-door hatchback model for 1989. It doesn't look much different from the sedan, and they did a good job of adding a hatch tailgate without ruining the look of the car. What exactly was there to ruin? The hatch will give you lots of cargo space and comes with a cargo cover, and rear seats do fold down, but only as one piece. Slightly odd since the sedan gets a 60-40 split folding rear seat in 89, but I guess that's because that feature is reserved for the new LTZ trim, which is not offered on the hatch. It also appears that the hatch still has a sedan-style fixed rear parcel shelf, which doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose? But I will say you sure couldn't get a little 5-door hatch with a V6 and a stick from any of the Japanese brand at this time. In fact, by 1989, only Mazda was still offering a 5-door hatch here at all, so this is kind of a cool model. The aforementioned LTZ trim, new to the sedans for 89, was more of a performance trim. It came standard with the V6 as well as an upgraded sport suspension that shares some parts with the Beretta. It came with new 15-inch aluminum wheels, the custom CL interior, a deck lid carrier, black mirrors, and a black front grille panel. This model also came standard with air conditioning. There was also a very rare XT trim, I think just for 89, and that was an LTZ trim with a special body kit, a spoiler, and a leather interior. But this model was only sold in California, and as such, it's so rare and forgotten about that the only pictures of it that seem to exist on the internet is this very low-res press photo that actually comes from an eBay listing. There were 3 option packages you could add to the early Corsica: preferred equipment groups 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 gives you auxiliary lighting, I think that means map lights, carpeted floor mats, a heavy-duty battery, and tinted glass. Group 2 gives you air conditioning, a tilt steering wheel, cruise control, and intermittent wipers, and Group 3 gets you power windows and door locks, a power trunk release, and an upgraded cassette radio with an integrated digital clock. A few more changes come along for the 1990 model year, most notably new engines. The 4-cylinder is now a 2.2-liter rated at 95 horsepower and 120 pound-feet of torque, and the V6 is now a 3.1-liter with a modest horsepower increase to 135, but a pretty significant torque bump up to 180. V6 models now get dual round exhaust outlets, and both engines are still available with the auto or manual. The base model is dropped for 1990, leaving the sedan available in LT or LTZ trims and the hatch LT only. The LTZ model also gets new seats for 1990. A fairly extensive interior update is done for 1991, which includes a new dash, gauge cluster, and a steering wheel with a standard driver's airbag. I don't really like the new dash, to be honest. It looks too 90s GM generic for me. We're getting into the era of GM interiors, which I call their Fisher-Price era because of all the cheap rounded plastics. However, I do think the new standard gauge cluster is better and now includes a temp gauge. The optional full instrumentation cluster is much improved as well, and the gauges all actually look like they fit now. The new interior also gets updated door panels, and most of the controls have been updated to 90s era GM part spin stuff. The cigarette lighter has been moved from the dash to the center console, although I'm pretty sure by this point the console shifter is gone, so I don't know if interference with that was an issue anymore, but the center console is probably a more convenient place for it anyway. They've also added some optional map lights that are integrated into the rear view mirror, and there are some standard fold-out cup holders on the passenger side of this new dash, which are sure to dump their contents on your passenger's lap should you ever try to use them.
Will it hold a... kinda?
It'll spill right into your crotch.
Yeah, that's...
On the exterior, they changed the tail lights from smooth to rigid, and these actually come from the Canadian market Pontiac Tempest version, which actually gets discontinued after 1991, so maybe that's why they moved these tail lights to the Chevy. There are still 3 option package groups, a few optional 2-tone colors are added for 91, and there are a number of individual options as well, which include the red accented body side moldings, the trunk carrier, the sport handling package, a full instrumentation package, and air conditioning. You can also get power door locks, the center console armrest, and electric rear window defogger as individual options. And there's a comfort and convenient package which gets you the 60/40 split folding rear seat, as well as a cargo net, 4-way passenger seat adjustments, sliding sunshade extensions, and visor vanity mirrors. There are also several wheel options and several radio options. 1991 is the last year for the hatchback and the LTZ trim. With no more hatch or LTZ, the LT sedan stands alone for 1992, but it does get some updates. The 4-cylinder engine is upgraded from throttle body to multi-point fuel injection, which increases horsepower to 110 and torque to 130. ABS becomes a standard feature in 1992. Also beginning in 92, V6 Corsicas are typically offered in automatic only, although I do think you could still special order a manual V6. Although the LTZ trim is gone, you still could add its upgraded suspension to 92 models as an option package. For 1993, they added a shift interlock to the automatic transmission, as well as a dummy light for low oil pressure. For 1994, the automatic transmission on V6 models is replaced with the new 4-speed, and the manual transmission has been dropped altogether now. This was done due to lack of demand, as manual transmission models were accounting for less than 3% of sales according to GM. The sport suspension package is no longer offered either, with GM also citing low demand as their rationale. The V6 engine itself is now updated to the L82 engine with sequential multi-point fuel injection, and power is up to 160 horsepower and 185 pound-feet of torque. The 4-cylinder also gets sequential multi-point fuel injection, increasing horsepower to 120 and torque to 140. In 1995, the Corsica gets a body-colored grille, moldings, mirrors, and door handles, as well as standard daytime running lights in the US. The rear suspension was updated to be more similar to the new Cavalier in an attempt to improve ride quality. They also cost-cut out the Corsica trunk lid emblem. It's just painted on there now, and only the outline of it. They didn't even want to spend too much money on paint. 1996 would be the final year for the Corsica. It would not be able to meet the 1997 mandated safety standards without a total redesign, and it was instead replaced by the new Chevy Malibu. You might not see many of these around now, but they were popular back in their day. I remember seeing lots of them in traffic when I was a kid. They might have gotten a little dull after the LTZ trim and manual transmissions left the chat, but next up, let's talk about its 2-door sibling, the Beretta. Now this one's a little more interesting.
It's like apple pie and a hot dog, y'all. It's like popcorn and baseball now. I'll tell you, Chevrolet's a heartbeat.
The Beretta is essentially a 2-door Corsica, but positioned as more of a sporty model, and they did do more to it than just delete 2 doors. Like the Corsica, the 87 model year was limited to fleet sales. Since we just talked about the Corsica in depth, for this chapter I'll mostly focus on the differences and the things that are unique to the Beretta. Styling looks pretty much the same from the front, but take a glance on the side and you'll find door handles that are flush mounted in the door pillars. This helps give it a more streamlined look, and the Beretta has a totally unique tail end from the Corsica, and I think it looks much better. Inside, as you would expect, the interior is very similar to the Corsica with pretty much the same dash, but it is different differentiated from the Corsica with vertical grille vents on the full dash length climate vent. A different grille pattern on the full length climate vent? That's the same way Honda differentiates their interiors now. And you thought I was joking when I made that Honda interior comment earlier. The Beretta also launched with this silly push button radio, but like the Corsica, this was also corrected for 1988. The Beretta never had a rotary wiper switch like the Corsica did. It used this slider from the get-go, as well as these different headlight controls, which I don't think the Corsica got until 1989. Interestingly, on the Beretta, the cigarette lighter is not up on the dash like on the Corsica. But John Davis didn't like this placement either.
But the cigarette lighter and ashtray at the tip of the mini console are too far away.
I don't think the automatic Berettas ever had a column shifter like the Corsicas did, so interference with the shifter would not have been an issue on this car. But I think the reason it's in the center console here is because the Beretta has an optional digital gauge cluster package that uses this space for some of its toggle buttons. This digital cluster gives you full instrumentation in the form of vertical bars. It really reminds me of the type of instrumentation you might get in an old video game or arcade racing console. Despite its simplicity, it's actually kinda cool and very 80s. I'm not sure if it was available to the 87 models, but for 88 you could add it as an option to any model with the V6 engine. Before I really dive into the 88 models though, I do want to point out a couple of other 87 changes I learned about. Some of this information I got from a website, beretta.net, which doesn't seem like it's updated anymore. There's a lot of broken links on it, but pretty cool site anyways, and did have a lot of good information on it. For models that were manufactured prior to January of 1988, the seatbelts mount to the A-pillar. However, starting in January of 88, Berettas received automatic seatbelts mounted to the door. This was done in response to the new US mandate, and the same change happens on Corsicas as well. I also read that in 1987 and early 88 base models, the Beretta name badge was on the door molding, but shortly into 1988 was moved to the quarter panel just above the body molding. They also added rear shoulder belts for the 1988 model year. For 1988, the Beretta is available in 3 trims: Base, GT, and GTU. One difference between the base Beretta and Corsicas is base Berettas come standard with the full instrumentation analog cluster. No basic 2-gauge cluster here. The engine choices are the same as the Corsica at first, with the Beretta offered with the standard 2-liter 4-cylinder or the optional 2.8-liter V6. The 5-speed is again the standard transmission, with the 3-speed auto being optional. Options included power door locks and windows, air conditioning, a power trunk release, a premium sound system, a rear defroster, and the custom CL interior package, so very similar to the Corsica. Moving up to the GT trim gets you the V6 engine, Oldsmobile style steering wheel, the custom CL interior package, gloss black exterior mirrors and badging with red accents, sportier suspension, and standard air conditioning. You could further upgrade the suspension with the Z51 suspension package, which equips the Beretta with what GM calls a rally-tuned suspension with larger stabilizer bars, firmer bushings, performance shocks, and 15-inch wheels. The GTU package was added later in the 88 model year and gives you a special body kit with front and rear lips, side sills, and a spoiler, as well as 16-inch alloy wheels, a body-colored grille, and body-colored breakaway mirrors. It only came in black, white, or red and was otherwise a GT model equipped with the Z51 suspension. Technically, the GTU is considered an appearance package, and the add-ons were designed by coach builder Cars and Concepts. For 1989, all Berettas now come with black exterior trim, and the side Beretta badge is moved again, back to the door but now above the side molding. 60/40 folding rear seats are added to the GT model, and 15-inch wheels become standard on this trim. I believe the Z51 suspension package is now standard to the GT as well. Now 1990 is where things really start to get interesting. The GTU model is gone, but there's a new GTZ trim. It's got a deck lid spoiler, a new rear valance, side sills, a front chin spoiler, fog lights, and a body-colored grille panel. It also gets some pretty cool 16-inch aluminum wheels that are body-colored. It of course has the upgraded suspension package. In fact, it's even better this time. In the brochures, GM calls this their level 4 performance suspension. GTs and the previous GTU models only have level 3. But the real fun for this model comes under the hood. No push rods here. This is the Oldsmobile designed high output quad 4 engine, a 16-valve dual overhead cam motor rated at 180 horsepower and 160 pound-feet of torque. Has actually quite a bit of power for a 1994 cylinder. It comes with a 5-speed manual only, as it should, and MotorWeek tested its 0 to 60 time at 7.5 seconds. And if you watch Pull Barn Garage, then you know that these things can still hit 0 to 60 in that amount of time or less. Even a well-used one in the snow loaded down by 4 adults. Inside, the interior does get a few slight enhancements. The steering wheel is leather wrapped and it gets slightly upgraded bucket seats. It uses the same analog gauges and the steering wheel as the standard GT, and if you want any power options, well, you still have to add an option package. All models do receive a few minor interior enhancements for 1990, mostly thicker cushioning on the seats. And I'm not necessarily calling this an upgrade depending on your taste, but both steering wheels are now black for 1990 instead of color matching the dash. As we discussed in the last chapter, 1991 will bring the major interior redesign with the new Fisher-Price dash, so if you want a GTZ model with the OG dash, 1990 is the only model year for that. Colors for the GTZ are similarly limited like the GTU, just red, black, and white. Like the Corsica, the base model 4-cylinder is now the 2.2 liter, and the GT V6 is now the 3.1. The GT now gets its own spoiler, and there's some kinda cool optional 15-inch aluminum mesh style wheels for it. These look pretty cool in black with the red accent stripe. There was also a special Indy appearance package you could add to the GT for 1990 in honor of the Beretta being selected as the Indy 500 pace car. The Indy package, in addition to a body kit and wheels, comes with some cool Indy graphics, body-colored matching stripes on the seats, and came in just yellow or teal. Now, the real Indy pace car was actually a convertible conversion, and GM was going to offer a convertible Beretta for 1990 as well, but it got cancelled. There is lots of advertising material out there about it though, and it's even in the Chevy full-line brochure as a fully detailed model with option packages for it and everything, so it must have been pretty close to production when they pulled the plug. 1991 brings the new interior and the driver's airbag and the discontinuation of the digital gauge option. But like the Corsica, the analog gauges are better now. However, base Berettas now get the peasant cluster, and full instrumentation is standard only to the GT and above, or you can add it as an option to the base. The armrest is now optional on the base model as well. GTZs still get a leather-wrapped steering wheel and a little red outline on the bow tie. The steering wheel in Dalton's Beretta appears to have been swapped in from something else, like maybe Illumina or something. Oddly, some 1991 Beretta GTZ ads show it with a body-colored open grille instead of the grille panel, and apparently some were actually sold this way as well, but no one seems to know why or how many. I guess Chevy just ran out of stock on the panel grills for a while. They also added the 3.1 liter V6 as an option to GTZ models, but only with the 3-speed auto, so it was actually a $119 credit option though, and sadly quickly became the more popular choice. Judging from the ads, I think most Berettas were being marketed to women. GT models now come with body-colored grille and mirrors. There's not too much to talk about for 1992. Like on the Corsica, ABS is now standard, and 1992 is also when they added the blue color option to the GTZ. All models get slightly larger front brakes for 92, and just like the Corsica, the base 2.2 liter 4-cylinder is now multi-point fuel injected. 1993 is the last year for the celebrated GTZ model, although the Quad 4 loses 5 horsepower this year thanks to exhaust port size reductions apparently done to reduce NVH. Well, Motor Trend did call the 91 Quad 4 one of the most raucous engines of its time. This is also the last year for the GT model. The Beretta lineup in 1994 consists of just a base coupe, and the new upper trim is the Beretta Z26, which neatly places it between the Z24 Cavalier and the Z34 Lumina. All is not completely lost, as the Z26 does still come standard with the Quad 4 and a manual transmission, although it does lose another 5 horses thanks to further exhaust port restrictions, and it doesn't get the same performance suspension as 90 to 93 models. The Z26 comes standard with the Level 2 sport suspension, and the Level 3 performance suspension is an option. Might I remind you that the GTZ came with the Level 4 performance package. But it seems most buyers of this car were not particularly performance oriented anyway, and most Z26s were selling with the optional V6 engine, which is now the 160 horsepower version with the 4-speed auto, so the days of a cool performance Beretta are kinda over. Unfortunately, not very many people seemed to want it when it was offered. Just like Corsica, the 4-cylinder is now the LN2, and you cannot even special order a V6 with a manual anymore. For 1995, the Quad 4 engine is dropped altogether. The Z26 is still the upper trim, but it's V6 auto only, since that's the way everyone was pretty much already ordering it. Like the Corsica, 96 was the final model year. There were some cool Beretta models, but they're super rare now since at the time not really anyone wanted them. Once again, the masses demanded convenience and comfort over sportiness and performance. I guess that's why performance economy models always seem to die out. It's hard to make them profitable. But I did promise to tell you a little bit about the Canadian market Pontiac Tempest version, so let's take a quick look at that one now.
hear the thunder, the call of the road. No time to wonder, you gotta go. You feel excitement, riding Pontiac. Get on your Pontiac.
The Pontiac version, which they decided to resurrect the Tempest name for some reason, was sold in Canada and also some Middle Eastern countries only from 1987 to 1991. Cosmetically, the only differences are a different grille, different wheels, and the ridged taillights, which the Corsicas didn't get till later. As I mentioned earlier, were from the Pontiac. The other cosmetic differences, all Tempests are two-toned colors with gray on the bottom and a standard black belt molding. Inside is virtually identical, save for the badging. It doesn't even get a different grille vent pattern. There are two trims, base and LE is the upper trim. It's got the same gauge cluster options, same engine and transmission options, and the same upgraded cloth interior option, although here it's called the custom LE cloth. Look at this here though. Someone at GM put a wrong picture on this page of the 88 Canadian Tempest brochure. I don't recognize what model that dash is from, but that's not a Tempest or a Corsica dash. The option packages are also very similar. Other than a rear defroster being standard on the Tempest, everything else seems about the same. I did read in the 89 brochure that the optional 3-speed automatic is a column shifter, but then the next page shows a floor shift auto. But that must be only with the LE custom cloth interior, which gives you the optional center console armrest. Maybe if you get the auto with the base interior, that's when it comes with the column shifter on early model years, and perhaps it's the same on Corsicas. The new engines arrive in 1990, just like with its siblings, along with the minor interior update, and a red accent line gets added to the black body side molding, which again is standard on the Tempest. One other thing I want to point out about the Tempest though is the trim differences. They start off like the Corsica, but then they get kind of weird and almost non-existent after 88. So in 1988, the LE trim gets you the V6 engine as standard, the custom cloth interior, more seat adjustments. That's pretty much on par with the Corsica. But then in the 1989 brochure, the only difference it shows between base and LE is literally hood insulation. The V6 is just a standalone option to either trim, and the custom cloth interior now has to be added to the Tempest LE as an extra package. In 1990, you get one extra thing added as standard to the LE. Standard aluminum wheels. I couldn't find a brochure for 91, but of course that's when the new interior arrives. But this is the last year for the Tempest. It didn't last as long as its Corsica and Beretta siblings, probably because there was no reason to buy it over a Corsica. I mean, unless you really wanted these lace wheels. Some people did buy these though. I remember seeing them. Must have been those catchy Pontiac jingles.